This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Drobo, smart storage that grows with you and protects what matters. Get 10% off your Drobo at drobostore.com using the offer code MV10. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have Joe Kissell back this time. It just seems like, the Take Control books just keep coming from Joe. This time, though, we have the second edition of Take Control of iCloud. Joe, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Joe, iCloud, first of all, I know when you all do a second edition to a book, it means that there have been some pretty significant changes. It's not just the little, they move the checkbox from the left to the right or whatever. Right. That there's some real changes. So what are some of the major changes? Because there are a couple of things I definitely want to ask you about with iCloud. But what are some of the major changes that you document in this book?
Sure. So I don't remember exactly when the previous update to the book came out, but as you say, a second edition is a big deal for us. We update our books like you update software. So like a version 1.0.1 will be kind of a bug fix, and 1.1 will be, we added a couple of pages, and 2.0 is like, no, we really seriously mess with this. So what I realized was that so much had changed with iCloud since the last edition that I knew that almost every page was going to change in some way, and I needed to rip out some chapters and add some chapters. So it's really very much different. So what has changed? Well, first of all, there's Mavericks came out, iOS 7 came out. And both of those operating systems do some different things with iCloud. One of the biggest new features is iCloud Keychain. I've written about that for Macworld, and I mentioned it briefly in my Upgrading to Mavericks book. But iCloud Keychain is a pretty big deal. It's pretty important. So there's a whole new chapter on that. Apple has also made a lot of changes to the way the Photostream feature works, so I did the best I could to document that. It's a wacky feature, and it doesn't work, I think, the way anybody expects it to, but I did the best I could to explain what currently happens. There are, of course, the new web apps for iWork for Pages, Keynote, and Numbers. I did not give an exhaustive, comprehensive explanation of how every feature works. Far from it. I basically said they are there, and here's where the online help is. That's an exaggeration, but that's a big new feature. User interface changed a lot. The web apps look different than they did before. They look sort of more iOS 7-ish. A lot of things got tweaked in various small ways, and when we realized that what you see on the screen no longer even approximately resembles what's in the book, you realize it's time for new edition. So I had really wanted this new edition to be ready when Maverick shipped, but so many other things were happening around that time with Apple Mail and so forth, and travel and other things that it was a little bit late, but it's current as of right now.
Joe, let's hit iCloud Keychain first. Because you are also the 1Password guy.
Right.
So I get, and first of all, unfortunately, let's just be honest here, iCloud does not have the best reputation for stability. 1Password seems to have a pretty good reputation for stability. Yep. So why should I use iCloud Keychain? What are the benefits over iCloud Keychain versus some other things? What are the convenience factors? Right.
As you point out, I'm a very, very big fan of 1Password. Also wrote a book on 1Password. I've used it for many years, and it's great. So I take the position that iCloud Keychain is not a replacement for 1Password, not a substitute for 1Password, but it's still a very good thing. I'm glad that it exists, and I use it, and it does a couple of things that 1Password does not do. The biggest thing that iCloud Keychain can do that 1Password cannot do is that it can autofill your passwords, usernames, and other stuff, credit card information, and so forth, on iOS devices. So you're just in Safari on your iPhone, and some password that you entered months previously on your Mac is just there. You don't have to switch to 1Password's special browser and unlock that with your master password and then go through this rigmarole to get your credentials in there. You're just using Safari and your stuff is just there. So that's neat. It's neat that I can even create a new password. It'll suggest random passwords. I can do that on an iOS device if I happen to be, registering for a site or something. And then that will sync back to my Mac as well. So for me, the thing about iCloud Keychain that makes it really compelling is that it works on iOS. Now, I would prefer that Apple have a plugin architecture on iOS as they do on macOS, so that web browsers could talk to password managers as God intended, and then I could use 1Password everywhere and it wouldn't matter. So Apple has decided, for whatever reason, no, we have to do sandboxing, we have to do it this particular way, so there can't ever be plugins and apps can't talk to each other like that. So if you want to have the convenience of being able to enter passwords automatically on your, you could, it's not that you couldn't do that before, it's just that they didn't sync before. So now they sync. So anything you had on your Mac or anything you create new on your Mac will just show up on your iOS device. So I'm really glad to have that capability because it's more convenient. It's less secure. So you have to take extra measures, make sure you have, your device is set to lock when they sleep or whatever. On a Mac, you should probably use File Vault. There are other things you should do to sort of make it harder for someone to randomly be able to get access to those passwords. And there are other shortcomings of iCloud Keychain too compared to 1Password. But you really can't beat the convenience. And if you're using Safari on an iOS device, you'll find it very, very valuable.
I think you just addressed one of the first questions I have was, security. And so it's not quite as secure.
It's different. So iCloud Keychain follows a very different model. First of all, you have to jump through all these crazy hoops to authorize devices the first time they're used and set up this special code and confirm with SMS messages, like just all these wacky details you have to go through. But yet, once you've done this, basically, as long as your device is unlocked, your passwords are just entered for you. You don't have to do anything. So if you don't have a passcode on your iOS device, well, you should really, everybody really should have a passcode on your iOS device. But if your iOS device should happen to fall into someone's hands during that time period when, it hasn't yet locked to where it requires the passcode, or if your Mac falls into someone else's hands and it doesn't have, set up to lock, as soon as it needs to, or the disk isn't encrypted or whatever, then someone can log into all these different websites. They could change your passwords. They could do other kinds of bad stuff. Now, with 1Password, you just lock or unlock your keychain as you need to. You can set it to lock automatically after 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long you want, and then you don't have to worry about it. But with iCloud Keychain, the assumption is as long as your Mac itself is unlocked or your iOS device itself is unlocked, then your keychain is unlocked. So I don't like that model as well. I think it's riskier, and in addition to being riskier, it's more awkward. It's more awkward to use, especially during the initial setup. It's just a very, very weird, cumbersome procedure. But what can I say? Apple made their decisions for whatever reasons. I'm sure they had good reasons, even if I don't agree with them. And it is what it is. But like I say, as much as it's not the way I would do things, I'm really glad that it exists.
Joe, it occurs to me that in the situation where I've lost my iPhone, I've lost my iPad, and somebody still has to get through the lock screen. No question about that. Is there a way for me to go into iCloud on the web and turn off keychain access to my iDevices?
You can't do it like that. You can certainly wipe your device remotely using Find My iPhone, or you can, if you haven't previously set up a passcode, you can do that remotely with Find My iPhone. And this, of course, assumes that your lost or stolen iOS device is going to be connected to a network. Somebody could snatch it and put it in a Faraday cage, and there are certainly a savvy thief would not let you get away with that, but a not savvy thief might be thwarted. But everyone should definitely use a passcode. If you're extra cautious or extra paranoid, there's a preference in your iPhone settings that you can make it not just 4 digits, but you can make it like a longer alphanumeric password. It's more cumbersome to enter, but also more secure. You can have it set up so that if somebody tries to enter a password 10 times and enters their own code 10 times, that it just wipes your device then. And so these are things that you can do and that you should do. You should not set it so that it's going to wait 3 hours before it auto locks. You should make that a relatively short period of time. And if you do these things, you're reasonably well protected against data theft. But I would sure like it better if I could just tap a button that meant from this moment on, you'll need to have my password if you want to get into my iCloud keychain.
Joe, you just mentioned that something. I did not know that I can set a lock screen code remotely.
Yeah, that's part of. That's not not the question that I thought you were going to ask. So I was just going to grab my iPhone and navigate to the place where I was going to tell you about the thing. But so that's part of Find My iPhone, which of course you can do this from another iOS device. You can do it from your Mac. You can do it from a web browser, and once you say, okay, this is I have selected the iOS device that I'm missing, and it'll show up on a map if it knows the location, and you can say I want to wipe it remotely, or I want to set up a passcode if it doesn't already have one, or I want to display a message on it and so forth. So that's something that is worth knowing about.
Yeah, absolutely. I did. Can you change one if you have already established it?
I believe you can. I mean, that's something that I cover in this book, but it's been a while since I actually looked at that. So
that's okay.
Let's use technology. I mean, I have this book. I say, okay, find my nouns. As I say, find my nouns because it's find my iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, Mac, friends. So all right. So you find your device. And you can play a sound. You can use lost mode. So this is only for iOS devices. Locks the device. Puts a message on the screen so that if it's just been lost, somebody could call you or return it. For Macs, you can lock them, and for anything, you can erase the device. And the passcode thing. Right. So when you are locking your device, if it does not already have a passcode, you can add it. If it does have a passcode, you can change it. So,
very nice. Very nice. I did not know that. I knew about the play sounds because I've used that when I've lost my iPad.
If with an iOS device, that's the lost mode, and with Macs, it's the just locking it feature.
Very nice. Very nice.
Hey, this is a great handy resource that some guy wrote that I can just refer to right here on my screen for all these little details. And that's kind of, but that's kind of this, like, there's so much. And here's the thing about iCloud is that it's supposed to be, you just turn it on and you forget about it, and it's infrastructure and things just sync and you never have to worry about it. But it turns out that there are all these wacky little details that aren't obvious, and that you have, like, how can you remember all these things? So I don't remember them. I have them in this little document
in the book. Yeah.
In my book, I sometimes have to refer to my own book to remember what some of these things are. Like, okay, so like another thing is Photostream. Photostream is crazy. It's just it could be simple. It could be one of those things where you just turn it on and it works the way you expect, but it never works the way I expect. And plus, Apple keeps changing the way it works. So I have to consult my own book to remind myself of, okay, now what exactly is going on here, because it's never what I think it ought to be.
Joe, we've talked about some of this, though. The more sophistication you add, the more questions that have to be answered. And syncing, for example, syncing is not easy. You would think it is, but you have questions over versions. You have what happens if I'm working on the document at the same time you are, or my Mac is working on something the same time my iOS device is. Which changes do you save, and do you do a change tracking? And then who's responsible for updating the change tracking to what really should be there. So it is tough. But how about Photostream? We talked in the pre-show about some of the changes that have come to this. Are they changes as you would expect, or changes that kind of take it in another direction?
All right. So the first thing is Apple has sort of changed their focus, as it were. Can you change your focus on photos? And their branding. So it used to be that there was this thing called Photostream, and that was the feature, Photostream. And so the main purpose of Photostream was to make sure that whatever pictures you take on one device or import on one device show up on all of your other devices. Then Apple added shared photo streams. So that's basically, it's a kind of similar concept, but it's not exactly the same. And it's a way that you can let other people in on sets of pictures that you've taken. And not only can you show them to other people, but you can let those other people add their own pictures to it. So that's nice. Now things are a bit different. So the two features are they've rebranded Photostream, what was previously known as Photostream, as My Photostream. And My Photostream, like if you go to Apple's iCloud website, where it like lists all the features, there's like all this stuff about photo sharing, and then like, oh, by the way, there's My Photostream, which is, so they've really kind of demoted the what used to be the core element of Photostream, which is sharing my own photos on all of my devices. And I have to wonder if the reason for that might have been that it never worked that well, or it never worked the way people were expecting it to work. So there are all these limits. So like in some situations there's a limit of it'll only store photos for 30 days, and in other situations it'll only store 1,000 photos, but there are like exceptions to these, and the rules have changed over time. If you go to Apple's website, it makes it look like, oh, you can upload unlimited photos for an unlimited period of time, and that's sort of true-ish, but then as it turns out, you open up iPhoto or Aperture or the Photos app on your iOS device, and there will never, ever, ever be more than 1,000 pictures in your photo stream, in your My Photostream. That's another thing. Like, Apple messes with language. It's called My Photostream, so I can't say your My Photostream, even though that's what it is, because it's not. There's your My Photostream, but then there's somebody else's My Photostream. Makes me crazy. Anyway, so there are all these sort of details and gotchas about under what circumstances are things uploaded, downloaded, because like what's going to happen is I've got a few Macs around here and a bunch of iOS devices, and my assumption would be that if I go into like iPhoto on one Mac and iPhoto on another Mac and go to the My Photostream section, that they're both always going to show exactly the same thing, but they don't. They might, but they might not. It depends. And then if I start snapping photos with my iPhone, what I see on 3 different devices could change. So it's complex, and it doesn't need to be complex, but I do spell out the details. So anyway, so that's the My Photostream. That's the like your own photos. Then there's this second aspect, which has now been elevated to not only to a new status, but they give it a new name. So it used to be shared photo streams. Now they're calling it iCloud photo sharing. And so iCloud photo sharing follows entirely different rules. So, like photos that you put in there don't expire after 30 days, and other people can add to them, and you can either share them publicly or share them privately. And there are sort of all these other little details that change. It's still not as easy as like Dropbox. I mean, it isn't. Like I have this whole I think it's a sidebar in the photo sharing chapter about, hey, Dropbox also tries to import all your photos from all your devices too, and it's doing this hard sell about, don't you really want me to take all of your tens of thousands of photos from iPhoto and put them in here as well? And but the fact is, they're really easy to share in Dropbox. Dropbox is faster, and it's in many ways easier and more friendly than especially iPhoto. And so I try to help you like think through, well, should I use both, or is that just like unnecessary duplication? or should I just use one or the other? And I want to like iCloud and I want to like iPhoto, but iPhoto kind of sucks, especially when you get huge numbers of photos, and especially when they're all syncing all over the place. It gets super, super slow, and it has a lot of features that Dropbox doesn't have, like editing and dealing with metadata and so on. But man, it's simple, and I want iCloud to be as simple as the marketing materials make it sound like it should be, but it just isn't.
Which is another reason to get the book, so that you can try to help it be simple. But
yes, well, I mean, and so this is something that I always struggle with, and I especially struggle with it with iCloud. Is people write to me and they'll say, "Okay, well, but this, I set up everything as described in your book, and some aspect of it isn't working. Like I'm getting some weird behavior, or this thing isn't syncing right, or this isn't behaving logically." And I'm like, what do I tell you? I'm describing the way it is supposed to work. I'm describing the way it usually works. I didn't write it. I wouldn't have created it that way if that had been my job. I don't have any special insights as to why Apple made the decisions they made, or whether something might be going wrong on a server at a particular moment. I only have the same access you do. I just look at what's I do experiments, and I say, well, these are the results of my experiments. And there are lots of points at which I say, this is a terrible design. I mean, I can't conceive of why someone would have made it so clunky, or why Apple can't solve problems that have been around for years. So I'm frustrated too. So the point of the book is not to give you the solutions to all the problems that ever happen with iCloud, because a lot of those problems are just entirely out of my hands. They're Apple's problems, and I hope that Apple solves them. But what I can do is say, here is what's going on behind the scenes that you might not have realized, and here's how to solve some things that are sort of just a matter of you understanding what the right steps are, and how to work around some common things that might confuse you. And here's what should happen if everything is working correctly.
This edition of Mac Voices is brought to you by Drobo, smart storage that grows with you and protects what matters. Get 10% off your Drobo at drobostore.com using the offer code MV10. Today I want to talk about my favorite Drobo, the Drobo 5D. The 5D comes with both USB 3.0 and Thunderbolt connections, and it is FAST fast. USB 3.0 is great, but Thunderbolt puts the 5D in a class by itself. As you might guess, I'm editing a lot of video. No, I'm not a professional editor, but when you start putting together a video show with 4 different guests, then add a combined shot, you're effectively managing 8 video tracks at once. When encoded as ProRes, each stream runs around 18 to 20 gigs or so. By most standards, that's a lot of data to work with. The Drobo 5N lets me work faster and smoother than ever before. If you want an even bigger speed boost, and I did, drop an mSATA SSD drive in as a cache, and it really screams. Benchmarks are great, but I'm more interested in real-world performance and how it affects what I do. And I can tell you that the Drobo 5D is the best thing I've found to improve my productivity. Sure, you could buy another Thunderbolt drive, or even a Thunderbolt RAID system, but you wouldn't get Drobo's Beyond RAID technology that protects you from drive failures. And nothing ruins your day quite like a failed drive that takes your data with it. You also wouldn't get Drobo's ease of expandability, and flexible upgrades when you need more space, and all of the other great features that make a Drobo a Drobo. Okay, so you don't edit video, but I bet you have a large photo library that's getting larger all the time, or an iTunes library that continues to grow, or maybe a home video library that you want to save and protect. Probably all 3. Get the Drobo Advantage. Get your Drobo at drobostore.com and get an extra 10% off with the code MV10. Or, until December 23rd, get special pricing from Amazon and B&H Photo. Either way, tweet me at Chuck Joyner with the hashtag Drobo4MV to let me know that you've joined the Drobo family. We'll welcome you with open arms. Drobo, Smart storage that grows with you and protects what matters. Thanks to Drobo for sponsoring this edition of MacVoices. So, based on this conversation so far and some of my own experience, the things I found that work really well with iCloud are contact and calendar syncing. That seems to be pretty much bulletproof. It sounds like iTunes Keychain, given the limitations and characteristics we just talked about, works pretty well. Photostream, maybe not quite so much, or at least not quite so much without a lot of tweaking and investigation as to how it works. Yeah. What else? Let's go on the positive side. What else do you find that functions really, really well?
So I'm basically with you. Like the things that involve little pieces of data, like contacts and calendars, usually function really, really well. Actually, my wife and I had a very weird syncing problem with reminders just yesterday, and I still haven't figured that out. They just like I have a reminders list, shopping list, just our family shopping list. So it's my reminder list, and I share it with her, so we can both access this on all of our devices. And what normally happens is that any one of us makes a change to the shopping list, and that just instantly shows up on all the other devices. So we got into a situation the other day where this was working for both of us on all of our devices, except for not on her iPhone. So other changes that we made on other devices would propagate to her iPhone, but when she made changes on her iPhone, but only on that one device, they wouldn't propagate to the others. So I don't know. Anyway, Apple's really good with those little small pieces of data that just have to get pushed to other places. Okay, so let's talk about documents in the cloud, because that's like there are a lot of apps that have in-app data syncing for little things like okay, so like Tweetbot. If you use Tweetbot, it can use iCloud to sync, where you are in your list of tweets and which is the last one you read. Okay, so that's cool. It's a very tiny piece of data, and that's one that's very easily synced. And there are a lot of apps that do things like that. They have in-app syncing for little stuff. But documents in the cloud, yeah, that's where like Pages on Mac and iOS store like their entire documents in the cloud, and then when you update a document, it gets pushed to the other places. Well, that's nice. That's okay if the documents are really small. If you have, if you're creating take control books in Pages, which we used to do, if you're creating big keynote presentations, if something is, tens or hundreds of megabytes and you have a slow net connection, these kinds of things don't sync as well. I rarely rely on documents in the cloud, especially for big documents, because it isn't really, everybody wants it to be like Dropbox. Again, it's not like Dropbox. And if that's your expectation, you're going to be really disappointed. So basically that's how I divide it up. Anything that, photos are fairly large, documents in the cloud can be fairly large. Those are the sorts of things that iCloud has trouble with. The smaller piece of data, less so. And then you have like mail is somewhere in between. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's terrible. One of my big complaints about mail, first of all, it got, it lost a lot of features between MobileMe and iCloud, so that sucks. It used to be much more powerful, now it's less powerful. But also, besides the loss of features that you can see, like this button or this checkbox or this capability isn't here anymore, Apple still filters spam silently, invisibly. Like sometimes you'll check your iCloud mail and there will be like something that's in your spam, your junk mailbox, so it's been marked as spam. But more often, things that Apple thinks might be spam are just summarily deleted. You never know because they don't show up in your junk mailbox, and the sender never knows because they're not bounced. The message just doesn't come through. And that really, really bugs me because, and this has been documented in Macworld, it's been documented in other places, but there are too many false positives to make that. If I can't know that a message that I send is actually going to get through, or that a message someone else had sent me is actually going to get through, barring some error message, I can't rely on that for email. So a lot of what I'm doing in the book is sort of saying, okay, now here's what does work, here's what doesn't really work, and here's a spot where you might want to not entirely rely on this. So, like, of course, I have an iCloud email account, but it's not my main email account. It's not what I mainly rely on because it isn't reliable enough. But at least, that's part of what I'm trying to do is help readers make informed decisions about what are the great features that you should definitely use, and what are the features that you might want to just not rely on so much.
I think that's extremely valuable, and it's great that you're, as you always do, you're shooting that straight with us, because it may, the way I want to use something may be perfectly fine. It may be enough. It may work just flawlessly for me. Your use case may be different, and you say, no, I just have to go another direction completely. So it's up to the individual to decide how much it works, but you can certainly point out problem areas or areas of strength to focus on. So
Right.
Yeah. Joe, the other thing that strikes me is Apple is slowly but surely seeming to try to make iCloud sort of one of the centerpieces of the Apple ecosystem. And we have some updates to Apple TV. We have the thing that you've talked about. Any feelings on whether this is a good thing or bad thing, and what have you done in the book to address some of that?
So let's talk about Apple TV first. So one of the things I did was I pulled all the material about Apple TV into its own chapter, because I figured if you don't have an Apple TV, then you can just skip that chapter. It's easier. Also, Apple TV is one of those things that keeps changing. Like every week, Apple adds more channels, or they change or add capabilities, or there's a firmware update. So that's more of a moving target. So I sort of segregated that all out into its own section. I just really have mixed feelings about it. I understand what Apple is trying to do and why they're trying to do it. I so wouldn't do it this way. Apple, if Apple is going to force iCloud to make its tendrils and insinuate themselves into all the different parts of all your devices, it needs to be not only solid, but it needs to be predictable. And I think that's the thing that really bugs me, is that it's not always predictable. You think you've done the right thing, and then you look at another device and no, that wasn't what I thought was going to be there. And Dropbox, by contrast, is highly predictable, and a lot of other cloud services are highly predictable. Now, I mean, there are features for which iCloud really is the only game in town. iCloud Keychain being a prime example. There aren't other ways that Safari on iOS can talk to a password manager. Apple just forbids that. So if that's something that you want to do, iCloud Keychain is the only way to do it. Now, for some things like contacts and calendars, sure, you can use Exchange, you can use CalDAV or CardDAV or Google or whatever. So there are other plausible options. But there are a lot of things where literally the only way to get a certain kind of data to sync with a certain app is to use iCloud. So my feeling is, if it has to be that way, then you need to make it absolutely reliable and predictable. And if you're not going to make it reliable and predictable, then please let me choose alternative means of syncing my data. So I don't know what to tell you. I just have mixed feelings about that.
There's nothing wrong with the mixed feelings, because the record of the service so far is a bit spotty. And I think it was interesting because I never really thought about it exactly that way. Small bits of data seem to work really well. Big bits of data, or big bytes, whatever. You're right. It gets a little shakier. And I don't know, maybe it's just because with the bigger things, you're trying to maybe do more with them, as opposed to the small ones that just, okay, I want you to be all places at once. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. The unreliability of certain aspects of iCloud, combined with the legendary unreliability of Siri. I mean, Because, of course, Siri doesn't require iCloud, but Siri does require a very reliable internet connection. And even if you have that, I very frequently get, sorry, I can't talk to you right now messages, and it's incredibly frustrating for Apple to say, hey, here's this feature, the reason you should buy our devices, and it's going to make your life so much easier and so much better, and you put your faith in that, like, yes, I'm going to invest my money and my time in learning this because I believe the ads and I believe the marketing, and then not only does the thing not work, but there's no explanation. Like, if I ask Siri, like, I'm in the car and my phone is on the seat next to me, and I without looking, of course, because my eyes are on the road, I press the Siri button. I say, Siri, I need directions to wherever, and Siri is like, I'm sorry, I can't take any requests right now, or whatever it is. I'm like, you haven't said why, you haven't said when you'll be able to, what I can do about it. Could you send me to Google instead? Like, I'm just out of luck. So I don't like being out of luck. I don't like having no other options, and that's a real frustrating thing with this increased dependence on the cloud.
That's interesting, and that's one place I might disagree with you, because I find Siri to be, I mean, sure, I get those messages too, don't misunderstand, but for the most part, she's not great, but she's good enough.
So here's what's happening, Chuck, is that that your iPhone can track your location.
Right.
Also knows who you are. So you're probably on Apple's good list, and I'm probably on Apple's naughty list. And so Apple can tell from my erratic movements that I'm probably lost, or like knows my schedule, knows that I'm late to get to an appointment someplace. And so Siri has been programmed to, especially for me, and especially when I really need it the most, to say, nah, I'm not going to help you right now.
Welcome to the Paranoid Joe Show. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, because usually, and not always. I don't want to mislead anyone, but if I get one of those messages, you can't help me right now. Honestly, I'm not sure I want her to be terribly verbose, unless there's something really wrong, or obviously wrong. You're not connected to the internet, stupid. Okay, that would help. That would be nice. But beyond that, just tell me, try again or something, and then I can do it again faster. And it usually goes through the second time. So I don't know. Again, not perfect, but certainly not horrible. And I do rely on Siri a lot when I'm driving to send emails to people, or more usually to myself, to remind me of things, set reminders, dial phone numbers, and she works pretty well.
Yeah, I'm happy that you've had those experiences. I like Siri. I've done talks on Siri at Macworld, and I really like Siri in principle. It's just I haven't had good experiences lately, and it's just inexplicable. Like, so we were on this cruise, and we boarded our cat at this cat kennel place. And so after the cruise, and I've only been there a couple of times, and so I didn't remember exactly how to get there. I have the exact name of the business and the address in my contacts, and so I'm in the car. I'm like, okay, Siri, directions to, and the exact name of the place. And not only did she said, okay, sorry, I don't know of a place called that. And I'm like, well, first of all, you should have been able to look it up on the web because it's on the web. Secondly, it's in my contacts with the exact name that I said. In fact, she even said, sorry, I can't find a place named, and the exact name that was in my contacts. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about Siri.
No. And this is why you should listen to Joe, folks, because
we're just here to generally trash Apple's. No. I mean, we're
no. But again, I mean, I find it kind of refreshing to see an author who has written a book about this stuff and says, I'm going to point you to the good stuff. I'm going to point out the stuff that doesn't work so well and maybe help you work around it. I respect that a lot.
That's certainly what I try to do, and there will still be problems, but I will help you with as much as I can.
So, without getting you to recite the whole book, anything else that we should be paying particular attention to with the newest, I guess, version, edition, whatever, of iCloud, and the one that's addressed in the book?
So there are a lot of other little things that either have moved around or have appeared or just sort of not obvious. Here's an example: mail accounts. So in Mail, you can have a bunch of different email accounts set up, IMAP and POP and Exchange and what have you. And iCloud can sync those account details amongst different Macs. So let's say I set up a new Gmail account on this Mac here. Then I go over to that Mac over there, and that new Gmail account is just there, and it's all set up, and I don't have to do anything. So that's neat, but it's only between Macs. It's not between Macs and iOS devices. So that's minus 1 point, and minus 2 points is that this feature is not. It is not part of Mail. So like in the iCloud preference pane, you have all these different categories like, Mail and Contacts and Calendars and Find My iPhone and stuff. But this particular feature of syncing email accounts isn't one of those ones listed there. And it doesn't have to do with Mail. Actually, it has to do with Documents and Data. But if you click Documents and Data, there's a give me more details. Which exact apps are syncing their data? And Mail isn't even listed there as an option. So it's happening, but it's not something that is exposed in the interface that you would know. Like if I want to turn this off, that I could do it this way, or this particular type of data is syncing. It's just not. So there are a whole bunch of things like that where it's great that the data is syncing. It's not obvious where or why or how it's syncing or how I might turn it off, or if I even can turn it off, or if I can turn it off, but only at the expense of also turning off other things that I want. So one of the things I try to do is to group a number of those little things together. I'm sure that I haven't covered all of them, but a lot of them. And also, I took like Mail, Contacts, and Calendars, which are like the things that largely work, and I said, okay, here's a chapter on all. I'm not going to have separate chapters on each of those. I'm going to have one chapter on all of those, and I'm going to basically say, here are the things that you can adjust and turn them on, and they'll work. Now let's get on to the other things that are less good. And again, I also, just as I pulled out the Apple TV stuff into its own chapter, I pulled out all the stuff on using the iCloud website into its own chapter. So I'm not giving you exact detailed instructions on every single thing you can do with all the web apps, but I'm telling you sort of how to get around them and do basic things. So much of the book was rewritten that I almost don't know where to start. But the biggest changes are the ones we've talked about: the iCloud Keychain, the photo sharing, and my Photostream, and the new web apps. And I've tried to do justice to all of it.
Joe, one last thing before we go. Give the listeners just a quick update. The way we talked about this in the pre-show, the way you've sort of streamlined the book. You've taken out some things and gotten away from maybe some of the minutia that really you didn't feel was necessary, especially for a second edition book.
Right. So here, one of the frustrations we have with Take Control is when the thing that we're writing about changes, then a book can go out of date really rapidly. So, Josh is doing this book on Apple TV, and he like just finished it, and then Apple goes and adds new channels to it. And the nice thing about the Take Control model is, well, of course we can update the book because it's electronic, and we can push out an update to our readers. But still, it's really awkward to have to do that, especially to do it very frequently. And not all of our users are going to bother to check to see if there are updates. Not all of our users have signed up for messages from us when there are updates. So, and even just updating, like changing a couple of pages in a book, could take a surprising amount of time. I mean, if it's a book of mine, I've got to do the research and the writing, and maybe that only takes me a couple of hours, but then my editor has to go over it, and then there'll be edits and changes. I have to go over those, and there's some back and forth, and then Tanya has to do her pass, and there's back and forth there. And then once we've all decided, yes, that the text is ready to go, then there's like multiple days of production process to get it into all the different formats and upload it all the different places and send out announcements about it. It's an involved thing. So we don't want to have to do this any more often than is absolutely necessary. So one of the things we have tried to get away from in a lot of our books, but in this one in particular, is real detailed stuff where the stuff we're talking about could change. So I don't want to tell you, go to the iCloud website and click, the second icon from the top left, and then go to this exact pane of the preferences window and click that, because it's going to change tomorrow. We just know it is. So we've tried to make the material not only more general, but also kind of respectful of the reader, because you don't want to read to delete a contact, select the contact, and click the delete button. You don't want to read, because you can plainly see that on your screen. It's tedious for me to write. It's tedious for you to read. No, that doesn't help any of us. So we've tried to get away from a lot of the real picky, detailed stuff that is also really obvious or easily discoverable, and that might change at a moment's notice, and put more emphasis on the slightly higher level concepts. What is going on here? How does this behave? How do I accomplish a task? And we're hoping that by doing this, we're giving the books a little bit longer shelf life. We're making them a little more evergreen, and we're making our lives easier, and we're making books that are more interesting to read because they're telling you real stuff, not obvious, tedious stuff that you're just gonna glance at and skip over anyway.
Smart authoring.
We hope so.
Yeah,
I'm sure Apple will find a way to thwart us. Of course they will. They always do.
You really are paranoid, aren't you, Joe? You're worse than I am.
for years. I mean, because this book, before this book, there was a book on Mobile Me, and before that, there was a book on .Mac, and for years, every time we'd release a new version of one of these books, within 2 weeks, Apple would make some significant change to the service. They were just waiting. They were just waiting for the new book to come out, and then they're gonna, flip the switch. And this happens so many times that especially with iCloud, it's hard not to feel a little paranoid. But anyway,
let's look at it the other way. It's nice that you're that important to Apple, that they would pay that much attention.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'm trying to sell it, and I'm not sure I'm making it.
Well, I had a talk recently with with an Apple employee who was. He was trying to assure me that the things I write about Apple, particularly complaints, are actually read and heard and listened to by Apple, even though they never indicate that they have heard them, or never make any obvious overtures. That he says, no, trust me, the people in power are actually listening to you, and it is having an effect. So, okay. Good. I hope that's true. It'd be nice for you to say so. I mean, be nice to get an occasional "thanks for that suggestion" kind of message, or we realize this is an area in which we could improve. Thank you for your input. That would be nice. But okay, I'm glad they're listening.
Okay. So to all the Apple people listening, Joe's email address is, and
you know what my email address is. Come on.
And
if you can't find me on the web, then you shouldn't be in this business.
And you can send him chocolates at no.
Chocolates are okay. Chocolates overcome a lot of evil. So
there, we just found out how to buy Joe. No question. Chocolates. Joe, how about the specifics on the book? The price and all that.
Yeah, so this is a 15. I had to look it up because, it's a $15 book. It's 142 pages long, so it's actually slightly shorter than the previous edition, because in addition to writing about the new stuff, I was able to delete a bunch of pages that were either just not applicable anymore or too tedious. So, but still, it's a nice long book, and anyone who had the first edition should already have received email from Take Control about how they can upgrade at a discount. And if you haven't, write to tc-comments@tidbits.com, and they'll hook you up. Or if you have an earlier copy of the book, you can click check for updates on the cover, and you'll get all the same information. So $15 for new purchasers, well worth it, and it would be a really nice holiday present for me. And go to takecontrolbooks.com to buy that in all the usual formats,
along with chocolates.
Yeah, I have an Amazon wish list, and it really never occurred to me to put chocolates on there, but I totally could. But although it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't matter. Buy me almost any variety of chocolate, and I will be your friend. So
that's perfect. That's perfect.
I'm working on one of my new, top secret projects is a new diet book, which is, it's basically chocolate, wine, and cheese. It's my new special, three-step formula to weight loss and fitness. So that'll be coming real soon.
Well, I should ask if that's going to be a Take Control book, but we don't want to go that far. We'll just let it ride. So, hey, Joe, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for the time. Happy holidays to you and the whole family.
Thank you very much, and likewise.
We'll do it again. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. That's Joe Kissell. He's the author of the new Take Control of iCloud, second edition. It's one that you really need if you're using iCloud, because Joe, again, will tell you what's working and what maybe you need to avoid, or what you can do to make it work better. Until the next time, this is Mac Voices, the talk of the Mac community. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Mac Voices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.